Hello and welcome back to what is sure to be a big episode of the One Report here today on this channel. If you're new to this series, we recap the biggest talking points from the previous week regarding One Championship. There's a lot to get to with this one because, of course, we are going to be chatting about 1169, one of the biggest cards of the year for One. It went down this past Friday at Lumpinee Stadium, November 8th. We will go through that card top to bottom, as well as some fight announcements that we haven't covered yet that were announced in the past week or so. If you're new around here, we're getting pretty close to the 1,000 subscribers mark, so I would appreciate if you could drop this channel a subscribe, drop the video a like, all that good stuff. It may seem trivial. Believe me, I watch a lot of YouTube content. I know that everyone says this, but it really does help. And this part of my hair is going absolutely nuts. I need to get it cut this week, but busy week ahead, so we will get that done when we get the time. But until then, let's talk about One Championship. 1169, as I said, went down this Friday, this past Friday, I should say. And boy, there are some talking points. And we will start, of course, with the main event of the evening. I suppose a little bit. Let's chat about the card a little bit first here. 1169. How did I feel about the card overall? I thought that it was not the best One Championship card. There were some very impressive performances and finishes earlier on in the night. The title fights, all three of them were a little bit. I would say that the kickboxing title fight, we're going to go through all these fights one by one anyway, but the kickboxing title fight was good. And then the other two were a bit strange, as we'll get into. But the rest of the fights, there wasn't really any. There was probably one fight that I can think of off the top of my head that was like a standout. Oh, you have to go back and watch this. Otherwise, there was a lot of good highlights and performances that were worth checking out. But like I said, we will get to that as we go fight by fight here. And we will start, like I said, with the main event of the evening, where in one of the greatest results, I say greatest, that makes it sound like I don't like Anatoly Malakin. I certainly do. But Reug Reug is your heavyweight champion in One Championship. What a crazy world that we live in, eh? I'm sure people who have followed Reug Reug for a long time will know that, will agree with me that this is a crazy, crazy outcome. I can't believe that I am sat here today saying that. And that's not to say that I didn't give him a chance in the preview. I spoke about this a little bit, but in the lead up to this fight, I was kind of thinking, okay, well, Malakin can't take him down, so he's going to stand with him. And whilst he's a better striker, this is heavyweight MMA. Anything can happen. And Reug Reug is a natural. I say natural as in, let's not get into that. He is a bona fide heavyweight, right? This guy is huge. And Malakin is a big guy as well, but Malakin was able to make middleweight somehow. Umar, Reug Reug, Kane, or Khan cannot make middleweight no matter what diet you put him on. I don't think. I know that he's spoken about wanting to fight Malakin for the light heavyweight title. Whether he can get down to that, I'm not sure, because he's just huge, and that is a interesting narrative for this fight. And I think it ended up playing a factor in the. If you look at the heavyweights that Malakin has fought as of late, or even in his time in One Championship, of course, he did fight Amir Ali Akbari, who is a big heavyweight, but I just think Anatoly was so much better than Ali Akbari at that point in time, especially in the striking. He beat Krzyzhenko, right? The interim, was that for the interim belt? When he stopped him, yeah. But then apart from that, in his last 4 fights, including the Reug Reug fight, I would say Reug Reug is the only, like, what I'm basically saying is, yeah, he beat Arjambula, but Arjambula isn't really a big physical threat at heavyweight. Not to say that he doesn't have power. Everyone in the heavyweight division does, but I don't think he was that much of an imposing threat. And whilst Reug Reug is not the most skilled heavyweight, he is a dangerous guy, right? He hits super hard. He's super explosive, especially in those early rounds, because we shouldn't get away from the fact that this fight was a tough watch. It really was. There was a lot of nothing in this fight, long periods of not much action. Probably the most exciting moments of this fight were where Anatoly Malakin had Reug Reug up against the ring post at Lumpinee Stadium and was kind of, I would say, teeing off, but I don't think that really is true. He was trying to tee off, but of course, was having to be careful of Reug Reug's power. And Reug Reug was fine with basically just staying there and catching his breath, and I would say remaining defensively sound. But again, I don't know if that really tells the story of this fight because he got hit by some big shots. Obviously, Reug Reug has a hell of a chin. Um, Again, whether if Malakin had stayed at heavyweight this whole time, whether that would have made an impact, the fact that he would have been potentially bigger, maybe had a bit more muscle on him, whether that power would have been a bit more impactful on Reug Reug, I don't know. Again, this is simple fact of Reug Reug is probably the biggest opponent that Malakin has fought in quite some time. Anatoly also took some big shots, though. To be fair, we knew already that he had a great chin, and yeah, it showed in this fight. This was the most it was tested, and it held up for sure. But kind of as a result, when you get these heavyweight fights where neither guy goes down from some of these big shots, you're like, okay, we might be in for a long night here. Although I did think that as both of them would get tired, it would become a little bit more chaotic, and we might get a finish there. But no, it went the full 5 rounds. Reug Reug won a split decision. A crucial part of that split decision was a yellow card that was, I was going to say, awarded. What's the right word? Given, I guess, to Malakin in that first round for basically hanging his arms over the ropes when he was being taken down. It didn't really look like sometimes in the UFC or even in any MMA promotion for that matter, when you have a cage, sometimes you will have a fighter, put his fingers into the cage and really hook the cage to stop a takedown from happening. And that is, a clear and blatant foul. Sometimes you get, just someone's leaning against the cage and their fingers kind of hook in. To me, that seems more unintentional. It could obviously be intentional. I'm not, saying that doesn't happen, but these things happen, and I think it's only, of course, you spend a lot of time training in a cage, so you would think that you would be used to not doing it, but I think it's also kind of just human reaction to I'm gonna fall over here and reaching out for something. With Anatoly, it didn't really look intentional to me, like he was trying to stop himself from being taken down. It just seemed like he is such a big guy that when he was falling, that's where his limbs fell. He wasn't like, attempting to hook the rope or grab it. It's just his arm was outside the rope, and obviously that plays a factor. And look, it could have been intentional. It could be him trying to slow the momentum down of the takedown, soften the blow maybe, or potentially hold himself up. I don't know. But a yellow card was issued by Herb Dean because Malakin did it a couple of times. I personally felt like the later rounds in particular, I mean, Malakin kind of came back in the second round after a pretty tough first round where Reug Reug was able to take him down. Again, Reug Reug being a huge heavyweight, was able to just power Malakin into some of those takedowns. It was really, really crazy to watch. And I was like, oh my God, this fight is wild. And then not much happened for the other 4 rounds. Yeah, I thought Malakin had the better moments in the later rounds, and I thought that might be enough to swing the fight in his favor, even though he had a tough start to the fight. And the yellow card, of course, one championships MMA bouts are scored as a whole rather than round by round. So this isn't a case where, Malakin lost by, a point because of the yellow card. It wasn't a split decision, 48-47, whatever you want to say. But yeah, I thought the Malakin landed the more damaging shots, and I thought that damage might be enough to. It wasn't anything too significant, but I did think he did more damage. But it was close, and the fight was so strange that I wasn't surprised to see Reug Reug get his hand raised at the end of it. What a crazy world we live in, as I said, where Reug Reug is our heavyweight champion. I wouldn't be surprised if they do a rematch just because of how dominant Malakin has been in one. There aren't really too many options for him to go and fight somebody else. That being said, we'll get to Buchecha a little bit later on. I think you could do the Buchecha rematch with Reug Reug, but I wouldn't be surprised to see Malakin get a rematch because the fight was super close. It was a split decision as well, which I feel like you rarely get in one's MMA bouts. specifically the big ones at least. You tend to get a decisive winner. I suppose you get a lot of finishes, so that helps. But yeah, a strange fight. Not a fight I will be going back and watching anytime soon. I've watched it twice, and that is far too many times. Maybe I'll watch it again if they do a rematch. I'll watch it again. But crazy turn of events at Lumpinee Stadium. Reug Reug is your heavyweight champion, and it seems like he is going to, be reaping the rewards of this for some time, receiving a bit of a hero's welcome on his return to Senegal. So I'm happy for him. It's a cool win. It's a huge win, a life-changing win. But yeah, strange fight. Co-main event: Rodtang versus Jacob Smith. Another quite strange fight, I think, and I'll explain why. Rodtang, of course, missed weight ahead of this fight and was stripped of his flyweight Muay Thai title, which he has held since, I believe, 2019, off the top of my head, when he beat Haggerty for the first time. Yeah, this, is kind of like, it should be surprising to wake up and, well, not to wake up and see this, because it obviously happened at like a decent time for me in the UK, but to look at Twitter and see that Rodtang has been stripped of his title, one of the biggest names in one championship, if not the biggest, should be surprising. But, if you followed Rodtang for a long time and you know his reliability when it comes to hitting the weight and passing his hydration test, I was not surprised to see this be the case. I thought, I said in my preview that I thought we might get a more dialed in Rodtang because the Takiru fight is so close. And then that weigh-in miss kind of threw that completely out the window. And I really started to think, this might be, I don't get me wrong, we've been there many times where this has been the case, where you go, all right, Rodtang clearly isn't focused. Maybe somebody can finally pull off the upset on him. And Jacob Smith wasn't able to. I thought that he did fight better than their first fight, which was a 3-round contest, which Rodtang won pretty handedly. That being said, the longer this fight went on, I think the less chance Jacob had. And that showed. Yeah, the reason I say this is a strange fight is because I think there are moments where I came away from this fight feeling a little bit, feeling pretty underwhelmed, and not necessarily because of the quality of the fight, which I know a lot of people were complaining about before the fight happened. I know that there was a lot of people being very critical of Rodtang for missing weight, so I just feel like this fight was always going to be an uphill battle for both of these guys in some regards. And I initially kind of came away from it being like, I don't think Rodtang took that seriously. Now, you can say that he's done that in a lot of previous fights as well. Not only, with the weight issues, but then, just not being at his best in the fight, not being totally dialed in. But then I also thought there were parts of his performance that did seem like he was pretty. It was a weird fight. There were moments where I was like, Rodtang is taking this fight more seriously than he has in some of his previous fights, which is something that Jacob Smith spoke about. That's something that Jacob thought would happen because of the way that Rodtang fought him in the first fight. He didn't think that he would get the cocky, kind of flashy Rodtang. And there were parts in this fight where I was like, I think that is true. Rodtang looks very dialed in. And then as the fight went on, he started to taunt and things like that, and there was some weird kind of stuff, him kind of playing around with Jacob Smith at some points. He kissed Olivier Coste at one point, and at that point I was like, maybe he wasn't dialed in earlier on in this fight. Maybe he's just not taking it that seriously, because when he put his foot on the gas I should say, and would blitz towards Jacob, that's where he was running away with the fight. I thought the fight was quite competitive when they were kind of just trading strikes here and there. Rodtang probably did have the better of it, but it was still, a fight that you could see Jacob Smith potentially winning at that point. It was when Rodtang really started to turn it up and go through the gears a little bit more and pressure him and do those blitzes. He, of course, landed that beautiful upwards elbow that cut Jacob above his eye. That was, really kind of the defining strike of the fight. And from then on, it seemed like, Jacob was going to really struggle to turn it around from that point on. And yeah, I think that at the start, I was kind of like, oh, Rodtang's taking this quite seriously, maybe. And then as the fight went on and he started taunting, and then I realized that, oh, when he blitzes and goes forward, he's actually winning this fight fairly easily, but he's just not doing it. at first I was kind of like, maybe that is because of what Jacob said. Maybe he respects Jacob Smith an awful lot and he doesn't want to get caught. And I'm sure there is partly an element to that, right? He isn't just going to run at Jacob Smith because he's beaten him before. But I also just think it was a very comfortable performance from Rodtang. And I don't think he took it that seriously. And that, in some ways speaks to the skill level of Rodtang that he can do that. But it also, I think, draws some criticism. But then I've also seen, people argue that it was a crowd pleasing performance from Rodtang because they got to see the flashy, cocky, Rodtang that's having fun in there. And whilst I think that that is true, after the weight miss, I think it came across more as that he wasn't that focused and that he, wasn't taking the fight that seriously. And of course, Rodtang has been in some high level fights before and done that same thing. So it's not like, this is a new thing for Rodtang. He does taunt opponents and things like that. But yeah, I don't know. It was a weird performance. It was a pretty dominant win for Rodtang in the end. The Takeru fight has to be next. They kind of teed that up at the end of the fight, had them square off again. We'll see what version of Rodtang we get in that fight. As in terms of the criticism of Rodtang, I don't really feel like being that critical of him. Again, I don't really feel like he was that dialed in for this fight. But I don't know if you can, would it annoy me if I was a striker and in this division and things like that? Yeah, it probably would, because he obviously gets he gets paid a lot of money. He's always in the main or the co-main event. He gets all this attention and he, maybe isn't as professional as maybe that deserves. And so, yeah, I think that would annoy me. I know that Liam Harrison was pretty critical of Rodtang after this weight miss and things like that. There's a few others too. But I don't know. We've been here many times with Rodtang to this point where I'm like, this isn't new for him. I don't think it's going to change anytime soon. Will a fight with Takeru bring the best out of him? Maybe, but I also kind of feel like focused, dialed in Rodtang is a bit of a mythical fighter at this point. I don't know if we'll ever see Rodtang, really kind of knuckle down and become this different version of him. I think this is just who he is. And so I don't know how much you can criticize that at this point. Although, like I said, if I was a fighter, I think I would have a different perspective on it. In terms of his professionalism. But I think that's where we'll end that talk. Let me know in the comments. I'm really interested to get people's opinions on this. Was it a crowd-pleasing performance from Rodtang? Were you impressed? Did you have fun watching the fight? I still had fun watching the fight, I should say that. I knew that this fight would be entertaining. Rodtang fights are always entertaining. I just thought it was a little bit of a weird performance. Yeah, let me know what you guys think. Did he take his foot off the gas, or was it just a more... I don't know. I'm not sure. Is the matchmaking potentially to blame? The fact that he wasn't too motivated in fighting Jacob Smith again? I don't know. I'm interested to get your guys' thoughts. I'll have a sip of my tea right now. It's getting very cold here in the UK. So, well, I should say in the part of the UK I'm in. I can't speak for the whole UK, although I'm sure that it is cold everywhere. It usually is. So we are back to the tea rather than the iced coffee. That lived a short life on this series. All right, let's talk about the third world title fight. It was Jackie Buntan versus Anissa Meksen for the inaugural strawweight kickboxing world championship. Jackie Buntan wins a unanimous decision, I should say. Sorry, I nearly said split because it was so close. Fight was super competitive. If you look at the scorecards, it tells the story of this fight. Judges have got, they're like, I think they're unanimous on like 2 of the rounds or something like that. They did all score the fight 3-2 for Jackie Buntan, I do believe. There might have been a judge that had it 4-1. I think it was 3-2 across the board, though. Super close fight. One of those where if Anissa Meksen had won the fight, I wouldn't have had any complaints. So you do kind of feel a little bit bad for Anissa Meksen, maybe, that she didn't even get the nod on one of the scorecards because it was such a close fight. Although, I didn't score the fight myself, but I think, just looking at the fight as a whole in terms of an overall narrative, I did think that Jackie was probably landing the more effective strikes. I think that comes down to their styles, which was kind of the main thing to talk about here. Anissa is a very accurate, very efficient kickboxer. It's why she's been so effective at the highest level for such a long time. Her game is very, I don't want to say fundamentals because that makes it sound harsh, right? There are, for example, Alex Pereira is a phenomenal striker, but his game is very fundamentals. He doesn't throw capoeira kicks or spinning elbows or spinning back fists or stuff like that. He throws the occasional head kick and flashy kick and things like that. But mostly, he's a very he just does everything very, very good. And that's what a lot of the best strikers in the world do. Rather than, there are some great strikers who are very flashy as well. But Anissa Mexon is kind of in that cut from that same cloth, I would say. And against Jackie Buntan, who has got some fantastic boxing, very, very good combination puncher, powerful as well, explosive. I just felt like Anissa, could win the majority of the round, and then Jackie would land one combination that was kind of the most eye-catching thing of the fight. And whilst, the fight is scored on damage rather than, the eye test necessarily, but I did think it always looked like Jackie was landing the more damaging strikes. And I think that is why you get a outcome where, despite the fight being very closely contested, Jackie wins it on all three scorecards because of that exact reason. Yeah, I'm very happy for Jackie Buntan. She deserves this. She's been on a great run during her time in one. Obviously, her only loss was to Smilla Sundell for the strawweight Muay Thai World Championship. I believe that, she was booked obviously for a rematch with Smilla, and that didn't happen. And now who knows what's happening with Smilla right now. So doesn't look like she'll ever get the opportunity to run that one back. I don't think, I interviewed her ahead of this fight. It doesn't seem like Jackie's too bothered about that, but for her to go into kickboxing and defeat Anissa on her kickboxing debut is very, very impressive. And yeah, interesting what Anissa does from here. I'm honestly not too sure if there's much left for her in one at this stage. Obviously, she previously fought for the title at atomweight, moved up to strawweight for this fight. I think the size difference maybe did play a factor, because I thought Jackie, again, when you look at the most damaging strikes, again, that plays a role as well, in terms of what looks the most impressive. The fact that Jackie had some additional power and, of course, size, that I think did play into the fight to some degree. But it was a very close fight nonetheless. Adriano Moraes returned to the win column. The former flyweight champion submitted Danny King out for the second time. I believe he guillotine choked him in the first fight as well, so another guillotine choke for him here. I thought the first round was pretty competitive, actually. When Adriano scored that early takedown, I thought, okay, well, this is where the rest of the round is going to play out. But Danny was able to reverse the position and get on top, from what I remember. And the fight looked competitive. The second round, again, I thought, okay, this could get interesting here. And then, Adriano, one of his best attributes during his time in one championship has been his ability to capitalize on opportunistic moments. And, he was able to get Danny in a scramble, was able to get the arm under the neck and then get a guillotine choke. And it was an impressive performance. And I think that he will fight for the vacant title next. Not necessarily surprised. I thought that Adriano would win this. It was more competitive than I thought it would be, honestly. So props to Danny King. Even in defeat, I thought he looked good in this fight. Just when it comes to the elite of the elite, he made a small mistake that cost him against Adriano. And that is what Adriano does. So I'm sure that he will go on to fight for the vacant title in the near future. I don't know who that will be against. I know that Reese McLaren has been a name that has been thrown out there, which I think makes sense. So we'll see what happens with that. But it was a good performance from Adriano. And most of all, it was good to see him back in there, because I have missed watching him. It's always good to have Adriano around. What do you think? Adriano versus Reese? Anyone else at flyweight? Let's continue on. Kongtorani versus Tagir Khalilov. This was a pretty dominant performance from Kongtorani, who is quickly becoming one of my favorite strikers to watch in one championship. I've been super impressed with him during his time in the promotion, of course. He had that fight with Superlek last time up that didn't go his way, but it was an entertaining fight nonetheless. And he looked great against Tagir Khalilov. Just kind of maintained the range that he wanted to fight at for the whole duration. And it didn't really seem like De Gea had many answers to that. Some of his front kicks, contourny, I'm on about here, were beautiful. And yeah, he just dominated the whole fight at this range and didn't really give De Gea an inroad back into the fight once he took control of it. Yeah, very impressive performance from him. I really enjoyed watching this. Cade Ruotolo looks to be a serious problem in this lightweight MMA division. I was super impressed by his performance here against Ahmed Mushtaba. And whilst you could, I think, angle it in a way of he threw a big overhand, I believe it was an overhand left, and connected and put Mushtaba down. And, you know, it wasn't the most technical striking display by any means. My tea's getting a little bit cold, so that's why I'm drinking it quickly. But against Blake Cooper, Cade's MMA debut at 1167, he was quite, what's the word? I don't know. I don't know what the word is. Just it felt like he was kind of throwing things out there just to see what would land, and there wasn't a whole lot of thought behind it. He wasn't really setting traps or anything like that for Blake Cooper. Just throwing techniques and not really engaging too much, but just throwing techniques to throw techniques. And against Ahmed Mushtaba, it was a lot more, it felt a lot more focused, a lot more composed, obviously a lot more confident in his striking, and drops Mushtaba with a beautiful shot that landed. Like I said, I think it was a left overhand, if I'm not mistaken, but I haven't watched this fight back since the first time I watched it. Tries to get the ground and pound finish, doesn't get it, locks in the choke. I believe it was a Darce choke that he caught him in the end. And, you know, from there, it's a wrap, right? It was a beautiful, like, I'm a huge, huge fan of a good old club and sub finish. And Cade Ruotolo is going to have some incredible club and sub finishes if his striking continues to improve, because I don't think there are many people in MMA right now that after dropping Mushtaba like that and trying to get the ground and pound finish and not getting it would go for that Darce choke. Obviously, the Ruotolo brothers are particularly dangerous with that one technique. And it was a beautiful submission. It really was. Definitely go back and watch that if you haven't already. Cade is now 2-0 in MMA. Seemed before like he was kind of taking things quite slowly, and then I saw him say about, you know, he could get fast tracked into a title fight. So I don't know. I think maybe it was just the adrenaline of the moment. I'm sure that he will want to take things a bit slower, but we'll see, I guess. When Cade speaks about this in the coming days, we have still got a fair few fights to get through, so I might make a few of these a little bit faster. Sam A put on a great performance against Zhang Peimian. I was quite surprised. I thought this fight would be more competitive. But Sam A just looked great, you know. He was like a buzzsaw. Every time Zhang tried to get close to him, tried to close that range, try to cross the void, as Demetrius Johnson would say, Sam A lit him up with a variety of techniques. Showed his experience in this fight. Looked fast as well. Read the fight incredibly well. Again, a little bit like the Contorni fight. It just didn't really seem like Peimian had too many answers for that approach from Sam A, who was just doing such a good job of counter-striking Zhang on the way in. I thought he looked great, and I would not be against seeing the Prajanchai rematch for either title, Muay Thai or kickboxing. I know that has been spoken about already. So we'll see what happens from there. I mean, I wanted to see the DeBella Prajanchai rematch. DeBella, of course, is going to be returning next month to fight Rui Botelho instead. So I think that we could really see Sam A challenge Prajanchai, maybe on a Friday Fights tentpole card early next year. I wouldn't be surprised to see that made. Marcus Buchecha Almeida returned to the win column. He got another impressive early submission win over Amir Ali-Akbari, and I was quite surprised. I said in my preview of this card that I think he would struggle to take Ali-Akbari down, and then he'd have to stand and strike with him, which might not go too well. But I was wrong. He was able to get the takedown. He controlled the fight from that position, and, you know, once he had the back, it was game over. You know, Buchecha, if he gets your back, you know, sayonara. And yeah, very impressive. I was, yeah, didn't expect this. I believe it was the last fight on Buchecha's one championship contract, and he's been pretty outspoken about the gaps that he has had in between fights, specifically since his loss to Reug Reug, and then coming back for this fight. So, will he resign? If this is the last fight on his one championship deal, I would say probably not. Otherwise, I think that he could potentially get a rematch with Reug Reug, in order to fight for the title, but we'll see what happens on that. And, we'll talk about it on the one report, whatever happens with Buchecha. This is the fight that I was referring to earlier on as the best fight on the card. It was Eddie Abasolo versus Mohamed Yunus Rabah, which I think, I probably could have picked out as the best fight on this card, in terms of what would deliver the most action. Eddie Abasolo is just in crazy fights, man, and so is Yunus Rabah. So it was always going to be a lot of fun. Mohamed Yunus Rabah, how this dude thought that he would fight a bantamweight. I know that he stepped in on short notice to fight Simon Pett the first time around, so that's a big opportunity for him. But this guy is huge for a featherweight. I mean, Eddie Abasolo isn't the biggest featherweight by any means, but yeah, Yunus Rabah looked massive compared to him, and his power was on display here. Landed 2 knockdowns in the first 2 rounds, and I thought he was well on his way to getting the win, but he did slow down a bit in that 3rd round. I did kind of speak about that in the preview, how his cardio would look, because we haven't seen him go into the later stages of a fight yet, and he is so explosive. And Eddie is just tough, man, and he was able to come back, and then he dropped Yunus Rabah right at the end of the 3rd round. It was a fantastic fight. Not enough, obviously, for Eddie to seal the win, but a great watch nonetheless. And I thought that Yunus Rabah looked fantastic. So it's very, very interesting to see how he fits in here amongst the featherweight guys, because I do think he could be a legit contender, and he is very exciting to watch. So it's a lot of fun. And Eddie Abasolo, I kind of feel bad for, because his record in one isn't the best, but he's always in these great fights, and he's always competitive in them as well. So I hope that one keep him around, because he is one of my favorite guys to watch on the roster. Whenever he's in action, you got to tune in. Ayaka Miura securing another scarf hold Americana choke. Absolutely ridiculous. Props to Macarena Aragon, who I said in the preview is one of my favorite fighters already because of her name. But the fact that she walks out to the Macarena, enough said. Yeah, beautiful submission by Akamiura, securing another one of her signature submissions. 3 in a row now for her as well, so probably won't be too far off the atomweight contention. You'd imagine that if she had got that fight with Gian Raduan, which was cancelled twice, I think that probably would have put her into contention. The fact that her opponent at 1169, Aragon, was a new addition to the roster, I think Miura will probably need a win over a notable name in the division in order to get an atomweight title shot, but we will find that out in the near future. And finally, opening the card was a decision victory for Elif, who looked very, very good early on against Walter Gonçalves. Gonçalves did make his way back into the fight in the 3rd round, was landing some very good strikes. A little bit of a John Lineker approach. He was kind of shuffling towards Elif and letting those hands go either side. It was a lot of fun. Elif looked good in those first 2 rounds, as I kind of expected. The height difference and his ability to control the range was very, very effective in those first 2 rounds. It was only when he started to get a bit tired that Gonçalves was able to effectively close that gap and land some power shots, but Elif did enough to secure the victory nonetheless. That is it for this card. 1169. Let me know what you guys thought of the action from Lumpinee Stadium in the comments below. As always, I'll hit with a little pause temporarily. Actually, I'll just chill for a sec and have a cup of tea, and then we'll talk about these last few fight announcements to round out this episode. Because I need a break from talking so fast, and my tea has gone cold. Curious to know where you guys are watching this from as well. Drop a comment in the below. It's Monday morning, right? Cut me some slack. Drop a comment down below where you're watching this video from. I would love to know that, and what you're doing whilst you watch these. I'm a big fan of sticking a podcast or a longer video on whilst I do work or things like that, or whilst I'm cooking or whilst I'm at the gym. So let me know where you guys check out the One Report, where you get your One Report fix, and where in the world you are watching from, because it is a Monday morning for me here in the UK, hence why I am usually a little bit mumbling and well, not mumbling, stumbling over my words, I should say. Hopefully, I'm not mumbling too much. That is not the goal or intention here. Let's talk about these final few talking points that we have. I need to pull up the post first of all, don't I? That would probably be of use. The biggest fight announcement that we have would be this one right here. I was tempted to put a video up on the channel just about this fight because I'm pretty excited for this one, but I just didn't get the time to do it last week. But we will talk about it now anyway, because at 170 we have the return of the bantamweight MMA world champion Fabricio Andrade. He is going to be defending the belt for the first time in a rematch with Kwon Won-il. I could be saying that name wrong, so I do apologize. Pronunciation is always difficult on these videos, as I'm sure many of you have come to know. Fabricio Andrade is one of my favorite fighters in One Championship. It has been tough not having him for the whole of 2024. So I am very excited to have him back. And if you asked me for a wish list of, fights that I would be most excited to see in 2025, in my top 5, I would have Superlek versus Nico Carrillo and the return of Fabricio Andrade. And we now have both of those on this 170 card at the Impact Arena in Bangkok, alongside Tawanchai versus Superbon 2. This card looks fantastic. We're getting some great striking bouts, but it's good to see MMA represented on this big card as well. Fabricio Andrade is one of the best strikers that one have in MMA, if not the best. So yeah, stoked to have Fabricio back. Kwon has been on a good run since that knockout loss to Fabricio, maybe a bit closer to the fight. We'll chat a little bit more about that and break down the matchup a little bit more, chat about some of Kwon's wins since, but he's got 3 consecutive wins, I believe a couple of finishes in there as well. Not necessarily top contenders in the division that he's got wins over, but notable names nonetheless, and some impressive performances. So this was the clear and obvious one to go for. I think, for a long time we were talking about Stephen Lohman being the next challenger for Andrade, but he of course lost to John Lineker. John Lineker is currently in Muay Thai, and I don't think you can really do the trilogy fight with Andrade just yet. Potentially next for Andrade, I think that could be an option. But nonetheless, I'm happy to have Fabricio Andrade back, and yeah, very excited to see him. And this rematch against Kwon Won-il, who he absolutely dominated the first time around. So interesting to see how this one goes. And finally, we had a couple of more announcements for One Fight Night 26 that goes down next month. One of them is right here. And it is the return of Nakrob Fairtex, who's going to be taking on a rising star. One Championship says Colombian-American Diego Paz. I'm gonna guess, just a guess. Yeah, good upset. The Crob's been on a great run. I don't know too much about Diego, so let me know in the comments below if you guys do. I know that he's obviously making his One Championship debut here. And yeah, good to have Nakrob on this card. This One Fight Night 26 card, by the way, looks really, really strong, I think. It looks very, very good. And finally, we have to scroll down a little bit here to get to another fantastic matchup, I think, for this card. Shamil Gazanov taking on Halil Amir. Good to see some high-stakes MMA matchups on this card. Halil Amir, I think, is one of the best MMA talents that One Championship have got right now. He, of course, recently debuted at featherweight. Who did he fight at featherweight? Oh, it was the Abdulayev fight, wasn't it? Yeah. So I thought for some reason that he had fought since then. So he was a lightweight contender. Had 3 wins in a row over Nastyukin, Marisa Baby, and Mushtaba, and I thought honestly would be the next challenger for Christian Lee. But he instead decided to move down to featherweight, which he believes is his more natural weight class. He came up against Akbar Abdulayev, who I would really like to see back in action very soon. I think Abdulayev is one of the best MMA guys that one have got, probably the most exciting guy that one have got in terms of, potential ceiling, I would say. Right up there for sure. Halil Amir is another one of them, so no shame in losing to Abdulayev for Amir, that is. And Shamil Gazanov is a very, very good matchup for him at featherweight. Gazanov coming off of a win earlier this year Oh, he got a second win, didn't he? Oh, okay. I forgot that he'd fought twice this year. I was thinking of the January fight where he headlined One Fight Night 18. But he returned at One Fight Night 24 and got a decision win over Aaron Kanate for his third win under the One Championship banner. His only loss being a submission to Gary Tonin. That was a very impressive submission, and being submitted by Gary Tonin is a bit like, what are you gonna do? So yeah, great matchup here between these two guys. High level stuff. I think Halil Amir, like I said, is super talented, so I would expect him to come through this one. But Gazanov is no joke either. So I think this is a fantastic matchup as well. And I mean, let me pull up this card real quick because I think this card is looking very, very interesting. One Fight Night 26 here. Let me get myself out of the way. The return of Christian Lee in the main event, a submission grappling rematch, which might not be for everybody, but I'm quite interested in it. Shamil Gazanov, Halil Amir in kind of a top contenders matchup in the featherweight division, I think is fantastic. Dennis Puric back in action against Elias Mahmoudi is super fun. DeBella versus Batalio is super, super good. That is a fantastic fight. Tom Poon versus Daniel Williams, is going to be fun. For sure. That is going to be a exciting fight to watch. You also have the return of Yuya Wakamatsu, who is going to be taking Gilbert Nakatani from the US, who will be making his one debut. So yeah, exciting stuff here. I think, like I said, this card is looking very good. It looks to me like one of the stronger fight night cards we have had this year. I feel like I say that all the time, but I genuinely do think that this card stacks up with the other fight night cards we've had this year, and would rank pretty highly. Maybe we'll do that at some point, or rank the cards we've had this year. I don't know. That'll be quite time consuming. So we'll do that on a week that is less busy than the week that I have ahead. Thank you so much for joining me, as always, on the Run Report. I hope you enjoyed the recap of 1169 and those 3 fight announcements there. They're all pretty exciting, I would say. As always, follow me on Twitter. You can find that down below. Subscribe, drop me a like, all that good stuff. I forgot to mention that I am going to be doing a separate video to talk about Renier Derrida and his UFC debut, hence why we haven't covered that in this video. So that will probably be up tomorrow or the day after. So stay tuned for that, and I will see you all very soon. Until then, peace.